When you imagine the Kennedy White House, you might picture state dinners and other social events where artists, poets, and musicians mingle with scientists, politicians, and diplomats. You might think of the dinners where poetry was read, or scenes from Shakespeare acted out, or music played by some of the most acclaimed musicians in the world. But did you know that it wasn't only the famous, or even only adults, who got to enjoy poetry, theater, and other performing arts at the White House? President and Mrs. Kennedy also made sure the youth of the country could enjoy the arts at the White House. Find out how on this episode of JFK 35.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Welcome back to the JFK Library Foundation's podcast, JFK 35. I'm Jamie Richardson, and I'll be hosting solo this week, but you'll hear from my co-host Matt Porter later in the episode. Some of the most iconic images of the Kennedy White House involve the performing and fine arts. There's Robert Frost reading a poem at President Kennedy's inauguration, Mrs. Kennedy giving a tour of the recently restored White House on national television, and musicians, actors, and poets visiting the president in the Oval Office. One lesser-known event was the First Lady's musical program for youth. It was a series that took place 6 times during JFK's presidency. The first happened on August 22, 1961, and the last on April 22, 1963. At these events, a group of young musicians, dancers, or singers would perform to an audience of young people. The performances included everything from folk dancers, youth orchestras, ballet troupes, jazz musicians, and more. Those attending ranged from special needs children living in the nation's capital to children of the members of the diplomatic corps also living in Washington, D.C. To ensure that young people were involved as much as possible, Mrs. Kennedy would ask the children of the cabinet members and White House staff to help the social aides with the programs on the day of. Before most of the programs, President Kennedy would greet and speak to the young audience. His talks would often focus on the importance of the performing arts in the lives of young people, and how musical talent was a source of national pride, calling it, quote, a vital force in American life, unquote. At one of the programs, he said, people often have an image of an artist working on their craft in solitude with, quote, sudden fits of genius, unquote. But he goes on to say that artistic skills are actually developed like any other, with discipline and hard work. To end his remarks, President Kennedy would excuse himself to go back to work. But since the performances were held on the White House lawn, he'd say he'd keep the door to his office open so he could hear the music, which I find to be pretty charming, but maybe it'd be more intimidating if I were one of the young people on the stage. If you're interested in what some of these performances looked like, we've posted a selection of photographs and some of the programs and invitations on our website, jfklibrary.org/JFK35. To talk about how the JFK Library continues President and Mrs. Kennedy's support of the arts, I'm excited to interview my colleague, Maria Quintero. She's the Outreach Coordinator in the Department of Education and Public Programs here. Among other duties, she coordinates the library's performing arts series for children called Celebrate, which we'll be hearing about today. Maria, welcome.
Hi, Jamie. Great to be here.
Can you give us some background on the Celebrate series? How did it start?
So the Celebrate series is actually on its 16th season. So for over 16 years, this program started by being called the Children's Hour, and the idea being that they would bring together this family program to have children interact with and watch cultural performances. And as that's evolved, now we call it the Celebrate series. And like I said, it's on its 16th season. So this really takes place from the fall into the spring, usually starting in October, and we usually end our season around April or May. And we really organize it around cultural holidays as well as school vacation weeks, and really just giving a lot of the local families here in Boston and the greater Massachusetts region an opportunity to bring their children to see high quality arts performances for free, which are not always readily available.
That's great. What kind of performers come to the library for Celebrate?
So for Celebrate, we really like to focus on how this is a direct legacy from the Kennedys. So we focus on 2 things: promoting the arts as a key facet of a democratic society, and also giving the opportunity to really celebrate the diversity of our country and really highlight how that brings a lot of strength within the arts. So joining those two things. So the series is organized around cultural holidays because we want to make sure to give people the opportunity to see their own traditions reflected in our programming, and also give the opportunity for those that are not part of those traditions to become familiar with them.
That's awesome. So what have been some of the programs that have happened this year or will happen?
This year, we've already had a performance in honor of Latino Heritage Month in October. And so we had Veronica Robles Mariachi Band join us. And we've also already had a performance in honor of Diwali, which is India's Festival of Lights. And so both of those performances have really been a wonderful way that we're able to tap into the great diversity of the Boston region, and also of our country at large, to be able to give people an opportunity to learn more about these traditions and to really appreciate how they enrich our nation.
So you mentioned representing the diversity in not only our local kind of Boston community, but also in the nation. Why is that so important for especially children to have that insight and access?
So one of the wonderful things about having this be a family program is that it allows children to really interact with such a diversity and such a different range of performances. And really, one of the key facets of the development of children is really sparking their curiosity. And we really feel like these performances provide that opportunity for them. Each of our performances always ends with a Q&A where the kids are able to ask questions, sometimes about the cultural traditions that they just learned about, sometimes about the costuming, sometimes about how puppets are made. So they really get the chance to ask questions and get inspired by the arts at a really early age to start building that appreciation for the value of performing arts, and also start having in them a sense of curiosity around whatever they encounter that might be different than what they're used to at a very young age. So hopefully it becomes a habit, that curiosity becomes a learning habit for them as they continue through their schooling and become adults.
Great. So how do you actually put together this season? What kind of research or groundwork goes into making such a diverse and exciting experience?
So I always like to tell people that the research starts the minute the performance is over, because we start by gathering every single performance. We end with gathering feedback from our audience members, because they are the ones we serve. So we want to make sure that they are letting us know what they think about the performance, and that they're also letting us know if there are any areas of improvement on what they want to be, how we can better serve them, and how we can better serve their family and their children. So that's really where things start. But really, this is a year-round process throughout the year. Even though our season just started in October, I've already been vetting and observing some other performances to hopefully bring about for next season. And so it's really a revolving process of finding performers in the area that not only are very high quality and are able to display a wide range of different art forms. We have dancing, we have singing, we have musicians, but we also have puppeteers. In the past, we've had a jester come and do a performance. So we want to keep the variety of what the performing arts can look like, bringing in theater performance and different aspects of that, so that the children that attend these programs and their families can be inspired by all these different forms of art.
Have you ever heard from, in your feedback that you get from families and children, that have any of them been inspired to go on to kind of pursue either making puppets or singing or dancing or doing research on something they just learned?
We do get that a lot. It's very endearing to, whether it's casual feedback from the parents, the kids telling us afterwards that they want to do this. Sometimes the parents following up with the performers themselves on how they can get involved. A lot of our performers do actually include or partner with organizations in the area that do provide these art forms for children. And so sometimes it's them connecting to looking into that in their area. And sometimes it's kids telling me, I didn't know I could be an actor. That's so cool, because it's the first time they've actually interacted with a theater performer that is not on their television, but that is in front of them. It just makes them really excited and So we haven't followed up ourselves in the 16 years with anyone that has, pursued a career, but we do hear that from parents as well as repeat visitors who tell us that since they came last year to such and such performance, they've, made an effort to, have their kid pick up piano or pick up some instrument and things like that.
So we only have time for one last question, but since we are in the John F. Kennedy Library, I wanted to ask you kind of your thoughts on what's the connection between the Celebrate program and for children and families and the legacy left by President Kennedy and Mrs. Kennedy.
Yeah, so we're really excited that this program does directly tie to what Mrs. Kennedy and President Kennedy instituted in their White House. Mrs. Kennedy actually had a program series where they would bring performers. It was like youth concerts and different things to really inspire youth. This program directly links to both Mrs. Kennedy and President Kennedy's concern for and support for the arts as not only an important factor of what it means to be in a democratic society, but also a really important component of the cultural richness of our country. President Kennedy once said that the life of the arts is a test of the quality of a nation's civilization. And both Mrs. Kennedy and President Kennedy were very well traveled. And so they had a rich appreciation for what it meant to be able to understand and participate in the arts. Mrs. Kennedy especially was a very creative person herself. And that appreciation for the arts is something that we can continue to cultivate. In museums in general, family programming really allows us to be able to consider that next generation. It's in these values of appreciating art, of becoming lifetime learners, of being curious whenever you encounter something different instead of being afraid of it, that really encompass a lot of those values that the Kennedy administration was able to inspire in the nation.
That's awesome. It really kind of goes with the idea of passing the torch to a new generation. And so with the Celebrate program, we're able to do that through the arts and to get them excited at a young age.
Yeah, just a couple weeks ago, we had one of our performances and a parent came up to me afterwards and just said, it's been really hard the last couple of weeks to tell my kids about the world. And today was just a perfect example of what I want them to understand about the world at large. This opportunity to bring them together just gave them an opportunity to really engage with something learn about a new holiday that they didn't know about.
Well, thank you for coming here today, Maria. This was a great conversation. And if any families out there are interested, you can check out the Celebrate lineup on our website. It is at jfklibrary.org/celebrate, and you can see what's coming up for the rest of the year. Now that you've learned about our Celebrate program, we're going to take you to a recent performance held in honor of Indigenous Peoples History Month. The Wampanoag Nation singers and dancers came back to the JFK Library to share stories of both their history and modern culture. My co-host Matt Porter was there and takes you now to the performance.
Using traditional instruments and dressed in their ancestral clothing, members of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe performed for children and families at the JFK Library.
Our main focus is education, not entertainment. So that's the main motive, is to make sure people understand who we are as Wampanoag people, that our customs and heritage has survived. It has also evolved.
As a gift from the Creator presented us not only with the tobacco that we can return to the earth when we take things from the earth, but also the pipe, which is the vessel that allows us to literally inhale our prayer.
For performers like Anawan Whedon, it's a chance to pull away the veil and expose people to traditional Native American song and dance.
We may have a fan and some rattles to accompany that, obviously the crackling of the tobacco as it burns, and of course the smoke as it comes up from the pipe. So that basically is what you're about to see, and this is a dance that we do to, again, give back to the land that we have. So we've all come together.
And a lot of people may only see natives jumping around on the movies, or the chants may sound very similar and repetitious. However, to help people understand, we have a broad array of dance styles, all of which stem from historic events of importance. So to help people understand, we do more than just simply jump around to a drum beat.
Performer Kitty Hendricks Miller says she's felt connected to her Wampanoag heritage her entire life.
Natasuis Nanawita ka Kitty Hendricks Miller, Nutamas Masipiat, Natai Masipiat. Good day, my name is Kitty Hendricks Miller, and I'm a Mashpee Wampanoag, and I live in Mashpee on Cape Cod. Both of my parents have Wampanoag ancestry. Always known that I was Wampanoag and where our homeland is, which is Mashpee on Cape Cod. And a lot of people don't realize that we are still doing these songs and sharing these songs and dancing, and not just for the public, but in gatherings we have in our own communities. A lot of people don't even know we exist still, or that we were the natives that were here when the English came.
Hendricks Miller considers herself an educator as much as a performer. She aims to teach audiences about her tribe as well as to entertain them. Many of their performances involve bringing audiences up to the stage to learn them and participate.
I really like to do the circle dance, also known as a round dance, because everybody just comes together and it's kind of like an icebreaker, and just forming a circle and being eye-to-eye contact with the people that dance. And it's also I just really love the beat of the song.
For Whedon, who grew up in a Native American household, he hopes to have people understand what they're seeing isn't just art, it's part of who he is.
As Native people, trauma has affected us, not just from warfare, conflicts and colonization, things such as Wounded Knee Massacre, and alcoholism, drug addictions. There's a lot that faces Native Americans even still today. As a Native boy growing up in schools where they didn't tolerate long hair, they didn't even honestly tolerate my skin tone. And then, of course, they were telling me our people did not exist, especially when Thanksgiving came up. Anytime they were talking about historic Native events, it was always referring to the Native people in the past tense. And I would literally get disciplined for speaking up and saying, I am who I am. So to be able to wear these clothes, which, again, these are my clothes. I'm not in a costume right now. Right now, I am wearing my traditional tribal clothing. When I am wearing jeans and a t-shirt, I am wearing my costume. I am pretending to be something I am not. I am speaking a foreign language right now just so that somebody else can understand me on my own land. So needless to say, I can't wear my clothes enough. I can't dance my dances enough. I can't sing enough of our songs, tell enough of our stories. Personally, myself, I look forward to these opportunities as often as I can.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. Thank you for listening to our podcast, JFK 35. Visit our podcast page at jfklibrary.org/JFK 35, where we'll have some links to the photos and documents mentioned on this episode today. If you have questions or story ideas, email us at jfk35pod@jfklfoundation.org or tweet at us at JFK Library using the hashtag JFK35. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you liked what you heard today, please consider subscribing to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or leaving us a review. Or, even better yet, tell someone you know to listen. We'll see you again in 2 weeks for our mid-season finale. Thanks for listening and have a great week.